Hey everybody, and welcome back to the weekly top 10. I promise not to go away for as long as I did before. The reason that I didn't make a video for the longest time is I was kind of in crunch mode for college, which I'm now graduated. Yay! So just to give you an idea of what my degree is, I got a bachelor's degree in sociology with a minor in human services. That's in addition to the humanities degree I already had. So now I have an associate's degree in humanities, and I also have a bachelor's degree in sociology with a minor in human services. So yay! And that means I'm probably going to get promoted at my job too, which is also super cool. I hope everybody's holidays were great and everything like that. And happy late New Year. I'm glad to be back on YouTube. And I wanted to talk about a specific thing since there's been a lot of talk about religion and things like that in the news. And this weekly top 10 is about religious privilege. So the reason why I wanted to talk about that is that I think there's a lot of people who have misconceptions about what it means to be privileged. Most people have the wrong idea about privilege. They think that when we talk about privilege, it's all about economic privilege. When people use the term privilege, they're usually saying someone, was born privileged. They're talking about somebody who was born with money, somebody who was born in, like the upper middle class or upper classes of society. But economic privilege is really just one of many types of privilege that exist. And that's probably the reason why we use that and equate the word privilege with economic privilege is because it deals with more material things. Things that we can see, like numbers in a bank account, investment portfolios, bigger cars, bigger houses, better schools. Those things are all things that we can physically see, and therefore we equate privilege just with having more money. But there's really many different types of social privilege that exist. You can have privilege due to your race, due to your gender, due to your orientation, due to the place in the country that you live in, so forth and so on. So everybody in the United States essentially is privileged because we have a government that allows us to have a voice. And in that way, we share in, a privilege of, essentially national privilege. But there's other types of privilege too, and the privilege that I wanted to try to focus on today is religious privilege. And a lot of people don't understand exactly how religious privilege works. They say, well, religion is a choice. If you want the things of that religion, just go be part of that religion. Well, it's not really that simple, and I never really thought of religion as being a choice to begin with. Can you choose really to believe something different? No, you really can't. So being, and that's one of the reasons why religion is so highly protected in our government, because I think to an extent, everybody kind of understands that religion really isn't a choice. That religion you're either born into or you choose it or you choose to identify with that because that's the way you believe, no ifs, ands, or buts. So these are the 10 things that I came up with that kind of generalize a lot more ideas when it comes to privilege. So if ever you're in a discussion that you need to talk about privilege or to understand exactly how you don't share in that privilege and maybe how to fix some of those things, this is a list of ways that people in mainstream religions in this country, obviously Christianity, have privilege. So the first one is that your friends and family are likely to share your faith. Obviously, as members of a minority faith, many of us converted to that religion, and therefore your family does not share your faith, and a lot of your friends probably don't share it either. Maybe even your spouse doesn't share it. So you're less likely to, a lot of people who had, kind of fallouts with their family members understand that if you're part of a majority religion, you're not going to have that family fallout. You're going to have a closer family tie, and you're less likely to get kicked out or be cut off because you're a member of your faith. Same with, like I said, you'd be more likely to find a partner with the same faith, which obviously they say that, if you share the same faith with your partner, you're more likely to have a marriage that will last. And that has lasting effects in your entire life. You're less likely to be isolated due to your faith. So you're more likely to be able to find friends that share your faith and therefore have a larger family, friend circle, and then of course a larger pool of people to date from as well. you are less likely to have family members to try to indoctrinate your children into a different faith. I know some of you are reading this and you're like, oh, that my parents tried to do that. I have a friend who, her parents, she let her parents watch her child for the weekend, and on Sunday they went and had her baptized without her consent. It happens. Um, so, and in many cases there are laws against doing things like that, but in other ways it's very, very hard to do anything about that, especially when it's your own family. The second one that I came up with was that your workplace understands and accepts your religion. A lot of us have had to deal with this, where you don't talk about your faith, even in passing. You don't wear your religious jewelry, you cover up your tattoos, you make sure that nobody at your work finds out your faith because you fear you might get fired, or you fear you might not get hired when you're going for your interview. Um, there's lots of different things that go into this. There's been times that, if, for example, if you work with clients like I do, if you have clients and they find out your faith, they might not want to work with you. That's their right to refuse to work with somebody. And I've, known people that that's happened to as well, where they worked in a service industry where they had to work directly with people. And because of that, they lost clients because those clients didn't want to work with somebody of their faith. Same with coworkers. Coworkers may not feel comfortable working with somebody of their faith. And while you have a little bit more leeway with that, if every coworker refuses to work with you, which one of you is more likely to be, kicked out the door? Um, your workplace often also would give you your religious holidays off or pay you more to work on them. So, and you don't fear any like reprisal for asking for your holidays off. That's another thing that kind of goes into this idea of religious privilege at work. You can easily find businesses and services that cater to your faith. That's another big one. You can find your religious items at stores. You can find childcare associated with your faith. Childcare is a big sticker for people of minority faiths. If the only childcare they can find that's in their area is at a church, it's often, between, working at home or not working to take care of your children, or putting them in a daycare setting that conflicts with your faith. It's very difficult sometimes. I've come across that myself. Extracurricular activities pertaining to your faith exist for you and your children. That's another one that I thought kind of goes into that idea of businesses and services, because you can, go to, your children can go to camp that's associated with your faith. You can go, to Christian singles and stuff like that, and different types of events that are catered, and often even like trips and tours that are for Christians only. You've seen that as well. You will not be refused services due to your faith. I haven't heard anything about this recently, but one time, and there used to be a rap song about it, there was a coven that tried to hire a company to just to have porta potties at their event, and they couldn't. The place that they had hired refused to come because it was a pagan event. So that doesn't normally happen if you're a Christian. That actually also happened to me too. At when I was about to get married, I went to a hair salon, and granted it was a private salon, so it was a woman who had a salon set up in her house, and she was a private business, so she had the right to discriminate. But she did. She said she didn't want me in her house, and she canceled the appointment because she found out my religion. Also, discounts and benefits are often associated with your faith. So there may be things that certain businesses do on certain days that honor your faith, like a certain saint festival, or, things like that. And also, of course, the larger the religious community you have, the more people within that community that provide those services, and may be able to do so as a discount because they know you. Number 4 is mainstream society references your faith in a positive manner on a consistent basis. We all know this to be true, that essentially if you are a member of a minority faith, that your religion isn't necessarily thought of positively in the media. But if you are a Christian, you're, that is a constant positive association. People know the customs of your faith. You are not required to also know the customs of others, but you expect them to know your customs, and to know when your holidays are and everything like that. You expect that people should, people will use your holiday greetings, so they'll, wish you Merry Christmas and everything like that. I've never had any person come up to me on the street and wish me a Merry Halloween. It just doesn't happen, you know. Radio and TV stations are dedicated to your faith. We've all heard Christian music on the radio. There's several Christian TV stations. I only know of one show in Chicago that is that's on an actual radio station, not just Blog Talk Radio. That is a pagan-based radio show. So that's pretty cool. But there's only one that I know of. There are no laws against freely practicing your faith. Now, people might think, well, this is America. We have the First Amendment. Just look at the states that have laws against tarot reading, that have laws against even witchcraft, or casting spells, or against other certain artifacts. Until, I think it was like 1995, the pentacle was considered a hate emblem. So, there are ways that laws do restrict the way that we can practice as well. I've also heard of people being denied registering as clergy because of their faith, because they lack things that for the mainstream faith had. People do not ask you to speak to the entirety of your faith. That's another big one where, Christians are thought of as individuals, but minority religions are thought of as one entity, so that any action one of us does speaks for, is the action of all of us. And that's one of the things that I've noticed right now going on. I know there's a lot of talk right now about France, and I pray for the people of France. I have a lot of connections there. I've been to France, and, I don't want to be critical about anybody in France, because I do think that they have the right to free speech and everything like that. At the same time, even though there are certain people of a certain faith that did, do terrorist attacks against them, Muslims, that doesn't mean that all Muslims need to, publicly condemn the actions, nor do they need to be associated with the extreme members of their faith, because pretty much every religion has extreme members, and, it's not right to equate all Muslims with terrorists, because I know some Muslims and they're pretty good people, and I know that they are just as horrified, mortified about the terrorism that's been happening around the world as we are. So anyway, number 5, being associated with your faith is often equivalent to being a good or trustworthy person. And this works in a lot of different ways too. How many politicians do you know have invoked their Christian faith in order to get elected? So how many pagan politicians do we have? And do you wonder why there's not more pagans that run for public office? I literally know of a handful, and that's it. It can help with court cases. If you get arrested for something, a lot of times character witnesses are brought in that are members of your faith. You can invoke your faith as a way to show people that you are trustworthy. Often businesses have that little fish emblem on there, and people will cater to those businesses simply because they have that emblem. It can help you earn probation or parole if you participated in some sort of Christian rehabilitation program that are now prominent at many prisons around the country. You are not scared that social services will take your children away solely to your faith. Due solely to your faith. I've heard of horror stories about people being asked about their faith and whether it's going to harm their children. That happened to me at the hospital in North Carolina, and it was just kind of odd that they would say something like that to me. Nothing happened about it, and I still have my child, and everything like that. But it was kind of interesting that I had to sit there and defend my faith for a moment, and I still never really understood why that happened. You are not scared that your ex-spouse will be granted custody due solely to your faith. You do not fear the police will raid your religious gatherings. I've heard of stories like that too. Or you will be assured to gain permits for religious functions and public events. Criminals who happen to share your faith will not define your faith. That goes into what I was saying earlier. And no one accuses you or your faith of being responsible for illness or natural disaster. Sounds strange, but there are people who are going out there saying that a rise in minority religions, primarily Wicca and paganism, are the cause of anything from global warming to AIDS, cancer, so forth and so on. It's interesting that people think that, but they do. And it's sad that people have such a negative connotation of people who don't share their faith. Number 6, schools are more likely to honor your holidays and teach them to your children. You're more likely to have access to a school of religious backing, and that really goes anywhere from childcare and nursery school all the way up to higher education through getting a doctorate. You can do that all within private, Christian institutions. You're more likely to have access to scholarships exclusive for members of your faith, and we all know those exist. How many pagan scholarships exist? You are more likely to have school clubs and events for members of your faith. And that's true too. Prayer at the pole and, Fellowship of Christian Athletes, so forth and so on. You do not fear violence. This is number 7, I should say. Number 7 is you do not fear violence or threats due to your faith. You can display signs or wear emblems of your faith freely. Like we said earlier, how many times have you gone in some place and tucked your pentagram inside your shirt? It becomes like almost involuntary if you're afraid, and in certain areas you can be. The only time I've never had to do that was when I was in Portland, Oregon. But there are times that it happens. That you really don't feel like if you display your pentacle or whatever religious emblem you wear publicly that you will be in a safe environment. And that's unfortunate. You do not fear the police, like I said, will raid your religious gatherings, or that you'll be pulled over for having a bumper sticker on your car. You will not be a suspect in crimes due to your faith. We all remember the instances in the past where people have been associated with evil or harmful actions, especially those towards children, or anything that looks quote unquote ritualistic. The local pagans or occultists are often called into question simply because of their faith association, and that's wrong. But that doesn't happen to Christians. You can trust the police will assist you if you're a victim of a crime. So in other words, if you're victimized in some way, the cops won't say that you brought it on yourself, or just refuse to help you because they don't like the faith that you're in. Healthcare organizations share your faith. That's number 8. We all know that a lot of times, almost exclusively, the hospitals in the area may be run by churches, either Lutheran or Catholic usually, but sometimes Baptist if you live in the South. You do not have to fear poor treatment due to your faith. This, I'm sorry to say, I know has caused the death of at least one person. And I'm sure many, many more, but that's what I know of offhand. Hospital chaplains are present to help people of your faith in times of sorrow and grief. The hospital chaplains are almost always Christian. And if you go to a hospital chaplain who does not understand your faith, how much are they going to be able to help you when you're in a spiritual crisis or a moment of sorrow, in a moment of loss? They just can't. And you don't have that same access to those people. Number 9, you are likely to have a large religious community. That provides reinforcement for your faith, that provides social services to people of your faith, that helps teach your children your faith, that has a brick and mortar building dedicated to your faith. That's another one that the pagan community lacks big time. That you can share religious ritual with, that you can volunteer your time to your community in the name of your faith, and people will accept you. That you can donate money to organizations in the name of your faith, and they will not refuse the money. Sad to say, but I've known that happen at least once. Number 10, this is the last one, and I think everybody agrees with this. Your government often supports and invokes your faith. Your government observes your holidays. Your government officials share your faith. Your government conducts prayers of your faith. And your government officials often cite your faith as a guiding force in their legislation. So you can see from these 10 things kind of how different it is to be part of a mainstream religion. In this case, in the United States, that's definitely Christianity, which still holds about 75% or more of the population. That they have these privileges that, they don't necessarily recognize that they have them. And even if you find Christians who are dirt poor, they have more access to social services than you do. They have more opportunity to succeed than you do because there's those Christian universities. There's all these different ways that even if somebody doesn't seem economically privileged or socially privileged in other ways, they still do have this religious privilege. And I think this is important because, we've heard cries from, Christianity about how they're being persecuted and kept out of their rightful place in society. And I'm not saying that all Christians believe this, because they don't. Some of them are very pluralistic, very cool. I go to UU Church, and so I share pretty much every Sunday with a group full of primarily Christians. So don't think that I'm trying to bash all Christians here, because I'm totally not. But what's interesting is that there is this argument for those who claim that there is an assault on Christianity, and it's eerily similar to those who argue that there is an assault on the white race. Think about the arguments that they use, and really what it is that they're not experiencing an assault, but it's a dismantling of privilege. It's a state of being that they've been used to that now feels threatened to them. Their privilege is threatened. And in some ways, you'll never be able to take away those religious privileges. In our lifetime, there's always going to be a majority of Christians. So they're always going to have a large religious community. They're always going to have healthcare organizations and people in government that support their faith. But there are some ways that we can help those things by, showing tolerance and education about our faith and other faiths. We can help people understand that it's okay to learn about other faiths and to be tolerant of those people so that we don't have to fear things in the workplace. We don't have to fear so much losing our children due to our faith, or being discriminated against in a court setting because of our faith. So there are some ways that we can help this. I'm not saying that every way is helped, but I do think that in some ways the discrimination part has definitely been alleviated in the last, maybe 10 years. It's gotten much better. When 15 years ago, when I was a, relatively brand new pagan, there was a lot of discrimination still going on. There was a lot of times where, you could tell that the police weren't going to help you because of your faith. But nowadays, that seems to be, I don't see it as much anymore. I'm not saying that it doesn't exist, but I don't see it as much anymore. Definitely. Anyway, I'm so glad to be back. I hope that all of you continue to support me. I'm so glad and happy that there's still people who are, dedicated watchers of mine, even though that I haven't been posting that many new videos. And by all means, send me your suggestions about what you'd like to see for videos for me to do. This week, I'm going to try to post a couple more videos discussing things like workplace discrimination and social services, and maybe some ways that we can organize to create some privilege of our own. Thank you, everybody, and have a great night, and blessed be.